Hi everyone! Today we will explore 3 ways you can connect Visual Studio Code to the Digital Research Alliance of Canada clusters like Cedar. The first option is to use VS Code on your own computer and link it to the login nodes. This lets you access files and run and debug codes, but in this way you don't get GPUs. The second choice is to connect your VS Code directly to the compute nodes. For this, you request an interactive GPU job. Then you point VS Code at that node. Now you can use the GPUs in your editor. The last method is using VS Code completely through the web browser. You don't install anything, just open your browser and start coding. It's really easy, but you lose some features and extensions, and some of them are not available in web method. Let's look at connecting VS Code on your computer to the login nodes. To enable remote connection in VS Code, we need to install the Remote SSH extension, which allows SSH capabilities. Next, we need to set up details for our connection. There is an SSH configuration file where we can define entries per remote host. Here we'll add details like the host name, our username, and identity file, which I'll show you how to make that key in a bit. This sets up VS Code with the information needed to connect to clusters. We need an SSH key pair to securely log into clusters without re-entering credential each time. SSH keys works using a public and private key pair. The private key stays on your local machine only. The public key gets added to your cluster account. First, on your computer, we open a terminal and generate new SSH keys using the SSH keygen command. This creates those new public and private key files. We set a passphrase for optional added encryption on our private key to keep it more secure, even though it stays local. The keys save automatically to our .ssh folder. We display the public key content with cat, copy that text and paste it to our CCDB account configuration under SSH keys. By adding this public key to our profile, when VS Code connects using our local private key, our node can verify we own that pairing and automatically let us in. To enable easy access between connections, we add the private key to the SSH authentication agent by running the SSH add command and ensuring the OpenSSH authentication agent service is running on Windows. We can now SSH without password. Now finally, we can connect VS Code to our host using the remote SSH function. We select the Connect to Host option, choose the Cedar host configuration we defined earlier, and VS Code will open an SSH session to our Cedar login node. So at this point, our VS Code editor now has a live SSH connection established directly into our Cedar. Now let's shift to directly connecting VS Code to the compute nodes instead of just the login nodes. This allows us to use GPUs for our code instead of just CPUs. First, we install our SSH key again to authorize direct access without password to any nodes we get assigned later. Next, we request an interactive GPU job using the salloc command. This allocates a compute node to us and prints out the specific node named assigned. Again, we search for SSH configuration file. Then we add a new SSH host configs in VS Code just for that allocated node, entering the host name when we run the job. I added SSH configuration file suggested by the Alliance documentation that has config file for all compute nodes. We need to update the allocated node name for each new job. Finally, using that new compute node host config, we connect to host again in VS Code. This opens a direct SSH session to that GPU machine instead of the general login nodes. Now we want to open Visual Studio Code through a web browser while connected to Cedar using Code Server. This allows accessing a remote VS Code instance without installing anything locally. This slide covers connecting to JupyterHub on Cedar first, which gives us a remote Linux environment to work in. We sign in through the provided link using CCDB credentials. We can set number of cores, memory, and GPU types. From JupyterHub, we can launch a full remote Linux desktop interface through the desktop launcher. To enable launching VS Code, we need to load this code server module in our JupyterHub session first. We can then use the VS Code launcher to open a browser-based instance of VS Code connected to our remote session. Here we provide some reference links for further information on using JupyterHub, VS Code on clusters, running interactive jobs, and video tutorials on remote development from SHARCNET.